Welcome, and thank you for joining Culture, Connection, and Care, Strengthening Law Enforcement Wellness from the Inside Out. I'm Aimee Russo, and I'm a major with the Broward Sheriff's Office. And I'm honored today to moderate this conversation. Thank you for joining us to talk about one of the most important aspects in our profession, and that's taking care of people behind the badge. Over the next hour, we're going to explore how agencies can strengthen wellness from within by fostering peer support, building trust through chaplaincy programs, and creating leadership-driven cultures that prioritize mental health and connection. And I'm thrilled to be joined by two remarkable law enforcement leaders, Assistant Chief Lynette Falzone with the Fort Lauderdale Police Department and NAWLEE First Vice President, as well as Officer Lorena Foy, who's the lead organizational wellness strategist and a licensed mental health clinician with the Fort Lauderdale Police Department. And both of these remarkable leaders have decades of law enforcement experience. Chief Falzone has 26 years of law enforcement experience, and Officer Foy has 30 years of law enforcement experience. So thank you both for being here today. So let's start by grounding our discussion in why this work matters now. So Chief, why has wellness become such a critical issue in law enforcement today?
Thank you. I mean, you can call me Lynette. So, uh, I believe it's become such a critical issue because as agencies, we do all sorts of training to try to um, save our officers' lives from other people, from uh, traffic crashes and things of that nature. And here we have officers dying by suicide at almost 2 to 3 times the rate of other people taking our lives. So clearly, we need to do something. We do things for tactics for driving and for other things that are common uh, fatal errors that take officers' lives. And here we have suicide as a huge issue. So I think we need to talk about it and we need to take it seriously as our agencies.
So, Officer Foy, from your perspective, from the clinical perspective, what barriers do you think employees face when trying to engage in wellness programs?
I think one of the most predominant, and you can call me Lauren, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, one of the primary barriers I would say is accessibility. In addition to that, the stigma that none of us can deny. In addition to concerns about confidentiality, as it relates to accessibility, the Department of Justice did a study in 2022 that said 60% of organizations nationwide still don't have frameworks for wellness integrated into their day to day, and so it's extremely important when we're talking about what the chief just highlighted in terms of so many people losing their lives, so many officers not feeling like they have somewhere to turn to, not having any resourcing there to support them. It's extremely important for us to understand that accessibility matters. The stigma. There's no denying the stigma. Of course, in the culture, we say things like, it's okay not to be okay. Well, that didn't translate into policing.
Mhm.
That doesn't translate into policing, and it hasn't. And so, one of the things that we also need to be mindful of is the stigma. And the stigma is only we only are able to navigate that stigma if we meet it head on, and we make a commitment to prioritizing and talking about this. And providing and putting our money where our mouth is, and funding these resources that we so desperately need. In addition to that, lastly, confidentiality. That is huge, because officers are concerned that if indeed I do reach out, does that then disqualify me for future opportunities? Does that um, is there now a question of my fitness for duty? Things of the sort. These are real concerns that officers have. And so, therefore, I think it's necessary and needed for us to address these things again and say them out loud. I was so courageous of the chief just now to use the word suicide. It's important for us to say it out loud. Yes, so those are some of the barriers that I've identified in my work.
Absolutely. So thank you both for sharing those perspectives. So, highlighting and underscoring that we train on the tactical side, we also have to train on this side of things that are also high liabilities for our profession, and bringing out the human side of this work and why this topic cannot wait to be discussed. So, many agencies really want to support their people, but they face real limitations. Let's be honest, right? That might be budget, might be staffing, it might be time. So, let's talk about some practical and impactful resources that are available, such as peer support and chaplaincy. So, Lorena, When we're talking about peer support and chaplaincy, they often make a big difference, but they don't have the large cost that some might think. So what's some creative or innovative ways that you've seen these programs work?
Um, like you stated, they're not in any way, they don't put an additional burden on your overall, your bottom line, so to speak. But before I address that, can we just ground the conversation and kind of define what wellness is?
Sure.
Because I think it's important for us to understand that in our culture, as people that are at our core, we're police officers, and wellness is oftentimes thought of as physical prowess, physical health. Well, it goes way beyond that. When we're having this conversation, it's important for us to understand that we're talking about mental, emotional, spiritual resilience. These are things that impact an officer's effectiveness and efficiency. And so we need to understand that when we're having this broader conversation and we're using the term wellness, we're not just talking about one aspect of it. We're kind of it's situated under that umbrella, if you will. So back to the question that you just asked about uh, the efficacy of things like chaplaincy and
And how are they creative
chaplaincy.
and innovative for agencies to rely on?
Absolutely. Peer support is wonderful because, and again, we're talking about the keeping of costs and bottom lines. Peer support. We're talking about people that you're already paying. It's no additional cost. We're just talking about what you're going to have to do now to get them properly trained. In addition to that, we're talking about chaplains, most of whom are volunteers. So that doesn't impact the bottom line. So there's so many wonderful, innovative ways that we can utilize these resources. Um, our peers were integrated in training. We're integrated into the culture of the police department. We're already there, already having these conversations. Chaplains, I trained some of our chaplains. Um, to ensure that they are meeting the criteria that is set forth for our chaplaincy. Um, One of the things I tell them, make certain that the first time one of our officers sees you is not when a crisis happens. Do a ride along. Go to their trainings. Have informal bring a box of Joe, bring some coffee, have spark a conversation. That builds trust. I said, so when they're talking about prayer support, when we're talking about chaplaincy, I think the cornerstone of them, um, regardless of what the creative modes that we can use to do outreach, you've got to find mechanisms to build trust and familiarity. You know, it's extremely important for me, and I say that about command as well. Don't let the first time that the new officers see you for the first time when something happens, because at that point it's too late.
Absolutely. So, Lynette, if an agency doesn't have a formal wellness or clinical program, what's a good first step for them to begin?
I think so. We're very fortunate at Fort Lauderdale. We have Lorenia, and we also have who's a licensed mental health clinician. She doesn't give herself enough credit. We also have two other psychologists on staff, just for us and the other employees. Um, so they're kind of guiding posts for our peer support team and our chaplaincy program. So we're very fortunate. Like I said, there are other agencies that we've supported locally that are a little bit smaller, and maybe in a smaller agency you could have a peer support team, but the trust might not be there because it's too familiar. You're going to see each other too much or whatever. So, kind of the perfect mixture for our agency has been building the peer support team around not just officers, but also other professional staff. So, we have professional staff on our team that are in crime scene, traffic homicide, records, other areas of the police department that's been super effective. And the way that we view our peer support team is they're not clinicians, they're not treating people, but they're rather antenna throughout the department that are keeping a beat on what's going on and where it's going on. So everybody knows about the call that went out, the drowning or the traumatic call, but not everybody knows that this person's struggling with maybe having a death in the family or things of that nature. So we try to keep a beat on what's going on and the temperature throughout the agency, and then we train that team to know what the resources are and bring the people to the resources, figuring out what's the right resource for them, who might be friendly with them that we can kind of get an angle on them to communicate and see what they're dealing with and try to help them through it. So as far as like smaller agencies, I think And the other thing is we've had our own tragedies that we certainly weren't prepared to deal with um, after the team was established. And it's just, this is law enforcement. And you can't have an ego about that we can handle everything. So if something is too personal, I think you need to be able to reach out to other agencies. This is when we were brought in with other agencies. Smaller agencies have reached out to us, and they've continually reached out to both our licensed mental health clinician and our doctors to get guidance, to get assistance, to get referrals. Uh, so most agencies have an employee assistance program, but most people don't even know what that entails. They only study about it. They only study the word for the sergeant's exam, right? People that I've coached for assessment training, I'm like, they give me I give them the scenario, the person's calling in sick and whatever, and they give me back like, I would refer them to employee assistance. I go, and how do you do that?
Right.
Is it a 1-800 number, or do you have to go to the window and talk to so and so and get an appointment from her or him? I'm like, what does it entail? How many appointments can you get for free? Do you get any for free? Are they discounted? What what uh what health insurance is the clinicians under? So like in our agency, the health insurance that the clinicians are under for EAP differs from our actual health insurance, and we get 10 visits. So 10 visits, you have a crisis at home that can eat up 10 visits very quickly. So our we went to our health trust that runs our health insurance and told them, right after COVID, like people are dealing with a lot of stuff. And they actually did a moratorium on your copay so that don't have to start with one doctor and switch. You can just use the health insurance the whole time, and you can use it for EAP. So EAP is certainly one. Chaplaincy program, like Lorenia mentioned, super low cost, and the community wants to help you. They appreciate what you do. So let them help you. They already have confidentiality for the most part. There's just things that you check out. And we have them train once a month. It's really just a meeting, maybe about an hour or 2 hours. They go over a topic. They're excellent with some of the things that we're not excellent with, which is grief and family notifications and things of that nature. So using your resources like that, everybody can put their heads together and we can collaborate about a crime problem. As far as I'm concerned, this is a problem that we're all dealing with, and there's no reason that we can't collaborate with other agencies and make regional teams or do whatever we need to do based on the size of our agencies.
That's an excellent point. We train our staff and we give them all the tools to help communities, right? We're the gatekeeper of services to these communities, and rightfully so. But it's time that we also give these employees some services to help them help the community.
I think on that note, if you don't mind me,
Of course.
cutting in, I think that's a great opportunity for me to kind of highlight this whole idea of operational readiness.
Yeah.
When we start framing wellness as a tool for operational readiness, I think it'll be a lot more palatable when it comes to bringing this into this space, and furthering it in law enforcement so that we have more buy-in. And I'll tell a tiny short story. I remember a few years back, we have annual trainings at our police department, as does, I'm sure every other police department nationwide. And I remember I was on the range and I'm just getting ready to shoot. Never had an issue problem, no problems whatsoever with shooting. I get up there, I do my thing, I shoot the course, not a problem. This particular day, I had just gotten a phone call from my son's school. I have a special needs son, that he's having a bad day. I know what that means. It means come and get your son because he's really having a bad day. And so therefore, in my mind, they're calling me up to the line now, someone that's pretty proficient with her weapon. I bombed like nobody's business. Is that because I'm not proficient at what I do? But I wasn't operationally ready in that moment. Why? Because my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about what my child is going through, what's happened, what triggered him, those types of things. And this is real. And I kind of say that in a practical sense because I'm using myself as an example because this is happening all day, every day. And so when we start understanding that, we're not just simply talking about, we're talking about people being ready to perform this service for the community, for this organization and this agency. Um, in alignment with your mission. We're talking about these things, and it's extremely important for us to understand the significance of that when we're having these
Can underscore that
conversations.
enough that we're real people with real
Yes.
challenges, have real experiences, just like everyone in the community. And
Amen.
so providing these resources is certainly very important.
I really, yeah, I really like the word the terminology they use, operational readiness.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
Because when we're talking about the training and everything like that, and one of the mistakes that we see through our culture is reactivity.
Yes.
So most of these programs become reactive, and they really need to be proactive. So, and because a lot of people look at it like, well, you went through the trauma, now we need to teach you how to react to it. No, we need to prepare you that you're about to go through trauma after trauma. Go ahead with the next call. Trauma after trauma.
Trauma.
No one's calling you to their house because they want you to help blow out the birthday candles on the birthday cake. They're calling you there because the parents are fighting over, whatever that is at the birthday or whatever. So nobody's calling us for the positive.
Yes.
So the more you can, as a community, expose the police department staff to positive events and positive, I think it just puts money in the bank for when you have to go through these traumatic incidences and preparing your employees. I mean, you're trying to prepare them for everything else. And we know that we deal with this every day. And most of our employees will never have to be in a shooting, thank God. They'll never have to be in a serious car crash, thank God. But we're preparing them for all these things. And then what we know that they're actually dealing with, we fail to prepare them for.
Absolutely. That's an excellent point.
That's profound. Yes.
So we know that these types of programs succeed or fail based on culture, and culture starts with leadership. So command staff and supervisors set the tone for how these officers are going to perceive their wellness. So, Chief, from what specific actions from command staff show that wellness is a genuine priority for an organization?
I think you're seeing in a lot of states that they're actually making statutes that cover confidentiality of these teams. Uh, it's also something that you can put in your policies, that you can put your money where your mouth is. I think we said that earlier with budgets and things of that nature. So as a command staff member, if I don't know what my resources are in my agency, am I really taking it seriously? The other thing is through our peer support efforts over the past, I've been on the team for 12 years or 13 years. We've seen the best and we've seen the worst of the people around us and ourselves, I would say. And it's important as command staff members that you're not like, oh, do you remember when? Oh, so not having any type of revenge to somebody because we've all had our issues. Life is a roller coaster, and the next dip brings you to the next up. And we've seen our employees. We want them to be resilient. We don't want them to have a problem and then quit and leave. We invest a lot of time and money and their experience. We appreciate. We don't want to lose those employees. So retaining the employees, not making things punitive that they share, and giving them the avenues that they can actually get these resources. They can get them confidentially and know that nothing's going to come back. So like having clinicians on staff, they're not billing insurance. So they're not taking copious notes that have to be turned into some insurance company. They see people confidentially. As command staff, I don't question your day. And if anybody has ever questioned their day or if they ever have an issue with an employee that's in crisis, we had one last year. An employee was in crisis and their supervisor told them, we're kind of short today. Today's not a good day for you to go see Lorenia. And this person was in crisis. So Lorenia reached out to me. And as a command staff member, I don't need any names. I just need to know what the problem is. And that's what we do in law enforcement. We solve problems for everybody else. We need to start solving our own problems.
Absolutely. So, Lorena, how can frontline supervisors, both sworn and civilian, model these types of healthy behaviors and normalize these conversations about stress and trauma?
I don't think it can be stressed enough. I mean, I know, speaking to two people on command staff, how important it is for us to have buy-in from command, but it's equally important for us to have buy-in from our frontline supervisors, our sergeants, our lieutenant. They are having the day-to-day interactions with, say, our police officers and the like. And so it's extremely important for them to have an awareness, be versed on what it means for someone to be in crisis, have relationships, kind of, again, we're promoting these things because this is where, you're going to get that vital information. And they have their finger on the pulse of the police department. We say things like, bottom rung, is a sergeant, but understand the importance of what a sergeant does. They see them every day. They interact with them every day. They can see the nuance in their behaviors and if something's off and so on and so forth. So, um, so vital, so vital when we're talking about this work, because again, where the chief may not have that kind of insight, we have frontline. So they're extremely important in promoting and furthering. They're the ones that can, just for instance, just a few weeks ago, I had a sergeant reach out to me on the heels of a critical incident to say, "Hey, not for nothing, but I think my people need to come in for a debrief." Wonderful. That's an amazing indicator that we're doing something right, you know?
Absolutely.
And not only that, the sergeant stayed, participated in the debrief once it was scheduled, and led the charge, had the conversation, led the conversation with how the experience impacted them, and that kind of opened up a reservoir of conversation that I don't think would have happened had we not had not only the insight and when they left there, it wasn't a question of, is this going to be kept confidential? Am I going to be questioned for fitness of duty? Because guess what? Sarge had skin in the game, came out, said how they were feeling, said how they had, had been impacted and so on and so forth. And so that's a powerful demonstration of leadership. And in terms of us leading and again furthering this discussion and furthering this work, they are very, very pivotal in the conversation.
It's often been said that the sergeant or the first line supervisor is the most important person, right, in terms of supervision.
Yes.
And certainly they can support, encourage, and model the behavior that we expect our officers and our civilian staff to upkeep. So,
And something with that, Amy, and from teaching leadership, the first thing that you teach your first line supervisors is to know your people.
right.
If you know your people, 99% of the mistakes can be prevented. They'll come to you for guidance, creating that environment of psychological safety.
Mm.
So they know that they can tell you they don't know something, they need help, or that they messed something up. And then we can walk them through like how to remedy whatever it is. And so I know that's something that you and I both agree on that we've been teaching people is just know your people. And the more you know them and know them genuinely too.
Right.
Somebody asks for a day off for, like your son's football game.
Right.
Now, when I see you your first day back, did he win the game?
Right.
Just making a personal connection. I will encourage people to come back to you with more personal information.
And trust me, I'll never stop talking about my kid being his football game. So thank you. Yes. Yes. Okay, so this is for both of you. If an agency's culture has traditionally resisted these wellness efforts, where can leaders help shift that mindset? What can we do?
I think one of the primary things of what I said before and you commented on, understanding that in terms of furthering your mission, having your workforce, your team, that whatever you want to call the people that are under your charge, be operationally ready is extremely important. Extremely important. And so when we're talking about furthering this work, when we're talking about, where we go from here, when we're talking about how do we make an impact, it's extremely important for us to understand that, if we have some, if we were to put, if we were to put the priority in this area that our department, our community, the people that work for us, the people that come and truly you're responsible for. If we really make that a priority, I think everybody benefits, and I think it's important for us to really start being bold and brave and have these conversations. Make it a priority. I think gone are the days. What did you say? It's 2 to 3 times more in certain terms of the suicidality rates. Gone are the days that we could kind of hide and we can behave like this isn't a problem. This is a problem in our profession. It has been a problem in our profession. The wonderful thing is, just as indicated by us having this conversation today, I think we're gaining a little bit of traction. A little bit of traction, but we've got a lot of work yet to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think back to, when I started in law enforcement 27 years ago, and I don't ever remember having these types of conversations. either with my colleagues or anybody in the command staff talking about it. So the fact that we're here today doing a webinar, that folks are going to be able to tap into some of these resources, and even if it just sets a little seed for them to start something, that's where we grow. That's the impactful part of this. So certainly I underscore that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about scalability, right? So how do we make wellness achievable for every department, whether you have 15 officers or you have hundreds of officers? What models or frameworks have you seen that adapt well to different size agencies?
So, my roommate in the National Academy, she was with a small agency in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin had a collaborative group that would respond when there was an officer suicide or one of those truly traumatic things. And basically, those agencies had committed that they would mobilize whoever their representatives were to that effort. We've seen other efforts locally by us where they have a peer support team and they handle the day to day. And then if something they feel something is out of their reach, we've also seen agencies by us that have partnered with fire rescue. For whatever reason, maybe it's my opinion, but I think the fire department, they're normalizing these conversations more so than the police department. And I don't know if it's because they have a natural reflection period. Obviously we make all the fire jokes that they're going now for whatever, but they do go back home after, not home to their family and their support system, but their family, their work family, and they sit and they debrief things naturally. Obviously we joke because they're doing it over like gourmet recipes and things like that. But and what we do to our officers is okay, you good? No holes in you? All right, go to the next call. So we naturally don't debrief things. So unless somebody, like you spoke of, the frontline supervisor puts a pin in it and says pause, have that other district handle our calls. We're gonna go to the park and we're gonna talk this out. And we also, that's one of the beauties of having peer support spread throughout the department. When something does happen, it might not be that event that if it's just this has been all week with the same squad getting hit with things that are somewhat traumatic. Obviously, there's the ones that everyone feels are on the radar. An employee getting hurt, something happening with a child, things of that nature. But all these other things, they add up. So we've had supervisors pull us aside and say, "Can you host a debrief?" Or they'll pull one of the members of the team aside and say, "I kind of need a debrief for my whole team. It's just been one of those weeks." And I think that goes a long way.
Yeah.
So with scalability, seeing like regional collaborations, we've also seen technology in agencies that are maybe too big, where the peer support team, they say nationally you should be about 10% of your workforce. But is that achievable if you're actually training that team? So our team trains 5 times a year as a team, and then they go to other training and other conferences. So reaching out through different collectives and conferences, comparing notes, stealing good ideas, and everybody's willing to give you the good ideas. They want to see it in action. Researching technology that might help you, like there's apps and things that you can advertise who's in your team. So going from small to big, and if you are a large agency and finding the budgetary room to actually have a clinician on staff or multiple clinicians as your agency and some of the larger ones do, I think is huge.
I think one of the things I also wanted to add as it relates to scalability, um, start where you are. If you're a small agency and you really don't have the resources to be able to dedicate full-time peer support or, clinicians and so on and so forth, I know you at least have one trusted individual on staff that people go to and confide in. Maybe that person informally is going to be the person to kind of lead the charge, go out and get the information, go to these national trainings, go to their sister agencies and see whether or not they can steal some of their resourcing and some of their expertise. And it's funny that you say that because you don't even have to steal it, because one of the things I think has been beautiful about being a part of this revolution, if you will, is understanding that there's a mentality that we're all in this together. And so if we're all in this together, then I want you to know what I know, because that might save a life. I want you to do what I do because that might save a life. And so we are very, very eager to share this information. We're very, very eager to help. And again, you may not have the resourcing, but if you can just have one person get trained, that person can now act as your trainer, expert. and they can kind of carry the charge in terms of kind of getting the other people trained up and so on and so forth. Again, sometimes you've got to get innovative and creative, because you're always going to run up against the budget in these types of organizations. You're always going to run up against the budget, but there's so many wonderful creative ways. Peer support chaplaincy, different things like that, local churches, wherever. There's so much people that want to support their mental health agencies that are government funded or federally funded and so on and so forth. Tap into the resourcing. I remember a few years back, we going a conference, a symposium, um, spearheaded by IACP. It was such an amazing opportunity just to kind of connect to free. Did I mention free? FREE resources that are out there that we have. Valor is one of the, I think a lot about Valor. They have so much resourcing that is free to agencies, and all you have to do really, and I kind of put it to the test. I'm like, there's no way that they're gonna send someone to us at no cost. And of course we came back home, and I'm like, you know what, I would love to put on a financial fitness course for our department. And so I called up the individual that hosted the course, and lo and behold, showed up on our doorstep at no cost to us, put on the class, got on the plane, and went home.
Right.
And we didn't pay a thing. The only thing that we did was allow him to eat some of our lunch. And that was pretty much it. And so there's so much out there. It's just a matter of connecting and becoming informed.
Right, absolutely. So for those listening in, Valor is a program by the Department of Justice, and it's free for agencies, and they will often come locally to you, put on the training, and you can send your staff at other local agencies. And then NAWLEE also has resources listed on their website, as well as the International Association of Chiefs of Police. They have an entire section on their website dedicated to wellness. And so those are all really important topics for us. So let's talk about, we talked about technology and frameworks. So most oftentimes it's not necessarily going to be about size or funding, right? It's really what's driving this impact, and that's the culture of the organizations. But let's talk a little bit about, it's great to have these programs, and we're going to be asked, how are we measuring them, right? And how are we sustaining progress in them? So let's talk a little bit about that. Launching a wellness program is one thing, but sustaining it and providing its value is another, and often very hard to quantify, let's be honest. But let's talk about how we can measure and success and keep momentum going. So how can agencies evaluate whether their wellness and their peer support efforts are really making a tangible difference? Can you evaluate that? Can you put something tangible on that?
I think, what's happening around you is not really the measure of success. The measurement of success for us is really in our culture. So like in our agency recently, we just switched the name of one of our bureaus to a professional development bureau. And the mindset is that this bureau is to support you from hire to retire. So they encompass, when they hire people, the training that they're getting, all the way through to walking them out the door when the time comes that they need to leave. How do they leave? And are they good to go? Do they need anything on the way out? And then everything in between. Some of the other resources, and it just shows you, like, we started with one psychologist from a forward-thinking chief that hired the psychologist, and he was just for us and the other employees. We now have Lorenia, who's licensed mental health clinician, as well as another doctor on staff. They do EMDR, they do neurofeedback. And when you go and you talk to somebody about these doctors and they go, oh, I'm already seeing him, I'm already seeing her, or whatever, to me, that's the measure of success. When we put out an announcement to recruit people for our peer support team, and we have more people putting in for that team than we do the SWAT team or the detective bureau, that speaks volumes to that people care. They want to be involved in this. And the fact that they care about each other is huge. One thing that I don't think that we touched on yet, and I'll let you answer that question as well, but like I've kind of highlighted like trauma being like the driving force. And so we talk about the officers and the trauma that they're exposed to. But when we talk about other employees at all levels, ours included, organizational stress is huge. And, within the culture, creating that communication so people know why something happened. When all of us got hired, It was, you don't ask why, you just do whatever they tell you.
Right.
But now understanding the why makes us all more efficient and effective because we know what you're trying to achieve, right? So the organizational stress that comes with our jobs, in some agencies, they might not have traumatic incidents. They might only get a couple calls a month, if they're real small, or if their community is not that populated, or whatever the case may be. But the organizational stress is still real. And when you read about the suicides in law enforcement, you'll see a police chief in a small town kill themselves or whatever. And you're like, well, why? They're not going to these traumatic incidents or whatever. But the organizational stress, and also part of our culture, we know how to hold a grudge in our culture.
Right.
And, you think about your family, and you're with your family for, the entirety of your life. And granted, there's things that happen in families that can't be forgiven, and you move on or whatever. But if Lorenia slights me in the first year of my career, and 25 years later, I'm not going to take her to a special unit because she slighted me on a call in the first year of her career. Like, let it go. Part of the culture is like, we don't ever let people grow out of their mistakes, but we want them to grow out of them. So we have to forgive stuff like that. And if you made a mistake, you have to forgive yourself and get beyond it. And because when other people see you forgive yourself, then that opens up other opportunities. If you hold it against yourself, then you can't expect them not to hold it against you. So all of our culture, I think, we can use some tweaking here and there with a lot of things that are going on.
Yeah.
It's an important part. I've heard it said before that we're in law enforcement, we're very good judges of other people's behaviors and the best lawyers for our own behavior. And we often don't give grace to other folks and know that who you were 25, 26 years ago,
Right.
you've grown, evolved. So I think it is an important part of this is having a little bit of grace for where we are as human beings, and even for leaders, right? We don't always understand the decisions that they make. I'm sure there's decisions that you and I have both had to make that most folks don't understand why we made those decisions, but communicating it. When we don't provide information, people will fill in the information, right, with their own experiences. So, Lorena, did you have anything you wanted to add on to that?
Absolutely. As it relates to sustaining progress, I think that she covered it beautifully. And it's extremely important for us to understand how important it is for us to memorialize our strides quantitatively, qualitatively. We want to ensure that we're keeping data. We want to make sure that, because at the end of the day, there are times that we're called upon to kind of justify, especially when we're pushing. And in the beginning, like we're talking about, um, as it relates to scalability, you don't necessarily have to come in with huge budgets attached to your initiatives. You kind of build up to that. So as we are building up to asking to be a line item in a budget and things of the like, we want to make sure that we have qualitative and quantitative data to show that, listen, this is extremely important, and here's why. We did a survey. We've run a lot of surveys in our department, just simply to kind of, again, to continue these dialogues. It's impossible. We have 800 plus people that work for Fort Lauderdale, but to say hit send and to send out one of those surveys to capture some of the data, some of that feedback, to see how we're doing. A few years back, we did just that. And one of the questions that we asked were, how do you feel about our wellness initiatives? Do you think that this is something that is a great addition to to what we're currently doing in terms of caring for people? And it was overwhelming in terms of the feedback that was gotten from. And I'll often say to people, you don't know who's seeking services. You'll never know, because we don't tell.
Nor should
And
they, right?
that's one of
Yeah.
the beautiful things about, and of course, it's gonna take time, because when you're implementing, you're putting these things into place. This is foreign and it's new in our culture. It's foreign and it's new. So one of the again, I talked about in the beginning that confidentiality concern that oftentimes accompanies officers and prevents them quite frankly, from accessing resources. Um, it's wonderful that there'll never be a question. We're not even in the same building, and so we try to create that line, those lines of separation, so that people feel comfortable. And so when we're talking about sustaining progress, it's important for us to make certain that we're getting that feedback, getting that data, seeing what we're doing good and seeing what we can do better. it's important for us to include that in the conversation as well, because we're trying to keep the momentum going, and we can't stagnate if we're keeping the momentum going. We started with one, now we have three. And so we've got to keep that momentum going, because as we grow, we have to kind of rise to the demand, as we demonstrate that this is a wonderful resource, and people are accessing the resource, and there's a need. We've got to also, especially when you're talking to electeds and so on, you've got to justify. You want more budget? You want more money for what? And so you've got to be able to provide those numbers and that feedback and that data to justify, your ask. And so it's very important that we also do that when we're talking about sustaining progress as well.
So talking about the momentum, let's build on that. How do we keep these programs, how do they survive leadership or shifting budgets, challenges? I work for a sheriff's office, so generally every 4 years we might have a new sheriff. For city police departments, that doesn't quite happen just as much, but you might have a change in city commission, right, or mayors. So how do we help these programs survive and keep that momentum going?
I think fiscally, if you got to start somewhere, like Lorenia said. So you start with some low cost or no cost type options like peer support, chaplaincy, and things of that nature. You look for grant funding. Uh, and after grant funding, maybe you get matching grant funding, maybe you get regional grant funding. Um, but then the data that Lorenia spoke about, when I was in charge of our when we only had one doctor, the data that he provided me was basically how did he spend his 40 hours? 10 hours were teaching a training class, 5 hours were in executive meetings, and then, he took one day of vacation, and then X number of hours were therapy or whatever. There's no names, there's nothing of that nature. So having the data to back up the need, and I know you didn't mention it, but you recently started a practicum program with a local university to bring in a police psychology student into our fold so that they can get real life experience. So when you have a college that's dedicated to making more police psychologists, um, I look at it almost like victim advocates. Every department should have a victim advocate. Every department should have their own psychologist. How they apply it would be different, obviously, but sustaining it through budget and also scalability, and absent that trauma, keeping the team trained, investing in them so that they believe that they know what their mission is, um, and not putting them in precarious positions. If they ever called Lorenia in and said, "Tell me who you're seeing today," uh, she should offer to tender her retirement and resignation before she will let them know, unless she has obviously waivers and things of that nature. So I think I think it's something that, depending on what's scalable for your agency, and you can try something and then scale it up or scale it back. And we want to be a resource. So if somebody has questions, obviously our contact information will be provided after this. But I think all of our agencies are doing interesting things. I know you recently transferred, but prior to that, you were one of the first places to actually make a wellness room
Yes.
where officers can just, take a breath. And other agencies have contacted you to try to mimic what you set up in that district. So do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up because it's something that I'm really proud of. I worked with, one of the district captains who's now a colonel with us, and he had the foresight to recognize that, our officers, just like our deputies, just like your officers, are going out to these calls and don't have the time to decompress, and we expect them to go out there and deliver this upbeat, positive experience, right? Provide services, do all of the things, but yet we're not providing them with any of those same services that we expect them to give to the community. So in short, we created like a meditation room. You don't have to do meditation. It's just simply a quiet room where you can go in, take off your gun belt, sit down for a couple minutes, decompress, listen to some, calming music if you want to, or read some materials. And one of the great things is you don't have to sign in. We don't have to know. Your supervisor has to know you're off the road, obviously, right? But it had such a profound impact on our agency that now communications is starting one, detention was looking at doing one, and many other agencies for the first time, and even city governments are looking at doing this type of, we called it the Zen Den. It's a meditation room. So it was something that I was really proud of my time in law enforcement. So thank you for bringing that up.
One thing that I wanted to add as we're talking about this whole idea of, how do the programs last? Um, it has to be documented. It has to be, I think you said in the beginning, we're talking about, it having its dedicated place on your organizational chart. We're talking about it having a space in policy, general orders. We're talking about these things that are written in black and white because, you know, I might retire and the chief might retire and Major, you might retire, but that written word is still there, and so it's extremely important for us to ensure that when we're doing this work, one of the things that we're striving to do is ensure that it is documented via policy, via again, via you have a place in the org chart, and ultimately you have a line item on the budget. I did mention that before. I might mention it a couple more times before it's over. A line item on the budget because again, it's important for you to send a clear message that it's a priority.
And I would also add, adding it to your annual in-service, right? Making this a component.
Absolutely.
Not just firearms training, not just, proficiency in some other key tactical areas that we have, but really making resiliency on the forefront of tactical longevity in this profession, right?
And I hate to brag, but we absolutely do. It's woven into our annual 40-hour block training. In addition to that, when we are onboarding new officers in their orientation, it's also woven into that as well. And so I think it's very, very important for us to again not just show up and it be a one and done. Because if it's a one and done, we don't treat anything else is of importance in this arena, in this profession, as a one and done if it's important. We don't just interact with our guns once a year, or once when we're in the police academy and never again. It has to be an ongoing thing. And so I think it's important for that point that it has to be an ongoing. It has to be one of those things where you prioritize it by putting it into trainings. And we need to know that, yes, in addition to firearms proficiency and the like, we're also going to have to hear a little bit about wellness and operational readiness and so on and so forth. It's extremely important for us to do that.
Agencies might also want to consider, we teach them how to handle a call from A to Z, right? So we often give you what we call like an FTO brief, right? Here's how you handle a burglary. Here's how you handle an alarm. One of those items on that checklist must be, how do you debrief this call? How do you build resiliency on these types of calls in another area?
That's excellent.
So as we're wrapping up, I'd like to leave our audience with some practical takeaways and some inspiration. And certainly you ladies have all the inspiration in the world. So what's one thing that you wish every police leader understood about officer wellness?
I guess we all need it, and it's not just officers; it's all the employees. So whether your agency is busy and big or small and quiet, tragedy can strike anywhere. Both personal tragedy, both organizational tragedy, betrayal trauma of getting shifted from one area of the department to the other. There's just so many things that affect people, and you really you think that you know what's going to affect people, but you really don't know. And so, like an example, we had an officer that he's been through multiple shootings. He just seemed to be like the magnet that's always there when something happens, right? With unfortunately, like children passing away, these things of this nature. And towards the end of his career, and I think you'll know what I'm talking about, he went to a call where a mother woke up and had rolled over on her baby, and the baby succumbed to, not breathing. And he wanted to go home, and people are like, why does this guy want to go home? He's been through so much. This is bothering him. And he's like, it's not that incident that bothered me. It's all the other incidents flashing back. And he actually went through our doctor to EMDR, and he's a very big proponent of it, and he has since retired. But so I just don't think that you can properly assess what's going to affect people. What they have going on in their personal life affects their professional life and vice versa. So when we first launched the doctors, we did exactly what you said. We had in-service training, and they had me teach it, and I was a captain. I was very vulnerable, actually, to teach that 29 times. But
But it was chaotic.
it was good. It was good for all of us, I guess. But you know, when you talk about all the resources, making sure that people know that there's plenty of resources, that you don't need to know what they're accessing, that you just want to make more of them available. Because what works for me might not work for Lorenia or for you, Amy. And that things that go on in your life aren't going to be held against you for your whole career. If you seek services, like that's what we want. We want healthy police officers. Just like when you make a mistake at work and we write you up, we want compliance. We want you to get back on track, right? The same thing applies to your mental wellness, your physical wellness, your financial wellness, and your spiritual wellness. So if there's any part of that you as an individual and all of us in leadership, we're under stress. Of course, we're not the first one showing up at a traumatic call, but we have our own sense of organizational stress that's going on. So I think you got to model the behavior. I think you got to incorporate it in policy. I'd love to see it as an accreditation standard in the future where every agency is required to have it, just like they're required to have CPR or one of these trainings. Um, but but I truly think it starts with our culture, and that's from the top down and the bottom up. I think we all have to have the buy-in to make this work.
Absolutely. And just to put an end cap on that, um, all of what the chief said, I absolutely align with that 100%. Operational readiness, or wellness rather, it's a necessity. It's an operational necessity. There's an expectation that these are people, are going to go out in the community and they're going to do a stellar job and they're going to make all the right decisions and they're not going to, they're not going to slip, they're not going to fall, they're going to do everything by the book, exactly how they were thought, so on and so forth. But you forget that we're talking about human beings. And so we need to understand that, and really appreciate that. And once we understand that, that readiness, that necessity that we are touting and that we are advocating for, it's not this fad. It's an alignment with your mission. It's an alignment with your procedures. It aligns everything that you're trying to do as a law enforcement organization for the community. If you are if you truly care about the community, you've got to care about the people that you're dispatching out into it.
Sure, absolutely.
That's important.
So could you touch on maybe if a smaller or rural agency is watching today and might feel a little bit overwhelmed with how to get started on this? What's one realistic first step that they could take?
Make a decision. Make a decision that it's a priority. And so it doesn't really matter if you're a small rural agency or whether or not you're a large bustling agency. At the end of the day, make a decision that this is a priority and then seek out the resourcing. I guarantee you, like I said before, there's somebody that your agency leans on. Let that person be the person that you maybe send out to gather and garner information for your organization so you can build from there. Don't feel like you need to start with the end in mind. Start where you are at and build something. And sometimes it'll and until you build a framework that's sustainable, lean on existing, existing uh teams that are existing. We want to help you. Again, we're going to provide our contact information
Right.
at the end of this webinar. Reach out so that we can give you that guidance. There's so much resourcing out there. Get on the computer, Google certain things. There's a wealth of information that gives you a starting point. But again, identify the resources that you have that you're able to tap into. Your local church, you might be able to go there and build a chaplaincy from there, have a relationship with someone. If your local pastor, you might be going to church right now and say, would you like to would you like to volunteer at our agency? And before you know it, you've not only got the identified inside person, the peer support individual or practitioner, you also now have a person that you kind of deem as your volunteer chaplain. And so don't make this into something that is unattainable. Decide that you're going to do it and you'll see that the piece will fall in place.
So it doesn't necessarily today have to be this large scale formalized program, but it can be just as simple as joining this webinar, joining the conversation and taking it back to their agencies, starting the conversation. Right.
Excellent. Yeah.
So Chief, looking ahead 5 years, what does success in law enforcement wellness or operational readiness look like to you?
So like I said, maybe it being an accreditation standard, maybe it being just something that's just as standard as you're purchasing ammo and you have a firearms instructor, you have someone that teaches wellness. incorporating it into your annual training, and just having more people that want to get involved in it and recognizing in each other. So part of the class that I taught in the block training when we launched our first doctor was, like everybody says, I have your six. Well, like it's not the sergeant's responsibility. It's not the lieutenant, the major, the assistant chief's responsibility. It's not our responsibility to know what's going on with your zone partner. It's your responsibility. So you need to be accountable for your peers. And if Lorenia is I'm running calls with Lorenia on the same shift, depending on how widespread it is. If she's going through something and she's not going to get the help, then I have to step up and help get it for her, however that looks. And because if you were hurt and you couldn't run and you came to work full duty, I'd be like, Lorenia, you're not running today, right? So we need to treat the mental injuries like any other injuries. We don't judge her if she goes to the hospital because she twisted her ankle, right? Oh, if she had somebody stabbed her on duty and she had a knife sticking out of her, would I be like, you can't go to the hospital? So we treat these invincible wounds like they don't exist. Well, they do exist, and we need to treat them, and we need to make sure that our employees go home whole to their families, and that people make it to their retirement and live long after they retire.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wonderful. What we heard today reinforces that culture, connection, and care are the foundation of sustainable employee wellness. And these programs don't have to be costly. They just have to be intentional, consistent, and supported from the top down. And we want to thank NAWLEE today for their support of this webinar. And our speaker's contact information will be provided at the conclusion of this, along with other resources that we've spoken about. And I want to leave you with a last thought. When we take care of the people that serve, we strengthen the very community in which they protect. So thank you for joining us today.